name's Dan Kinjorski, your host to the Journey podcast, Pathfinder Counseling Group. And this is my co-host, Ms. Crystal Barbosa. And we're going to continue our discussion on the Gottman method today, level 2. Is that right?
Level 2, yes. And level 2 is nurturing your fondness and admiration. So basically, you can choose to think negative about your partner or you can choose to think positively about them. And that is what is the admiration. So it's how you're thinking about your partner.
So it's a positive versus negative mindset.
Exactly.
So Gottman encourages the more positive relationship, the more positive communication style or verbiage.
And in that sense, like we talked about last time, the first 3 minutes of any conversation is going to tell you how the rest of it's going to go. So if you start a conversation with a positive, hey babe, thank you so much for being so patient with me, that's going to start off, that's going to continue with the conversation being in that same positive light. Right. Versus you always bother me when you do this. We can say all the negative things in the world, but we got to make sure that we also put in the positive in our relationship, because if we're just, for lack of better words, nagging or just saying negative things about our partner,
right,
where's the admiration, where's the love? And that goes hand in hand with our previous talk about step 1, which was love maps, getting to know each other.
Right.
If we know one another very well, then it's very easy to think of all the nice things we can say about them.
And it sort of goes with the scripture that says that love is patient, love is kind. I think it's 1 Corinthians 13.
Oh, that's perfect. It's exactly what it is. And it thinks in those same kind ways. And so, like you said, it's thinking positive versus negatively. And also ensuring that as you are in that relationship, you're continuing to have those positive thoughts, because we can be married for 10, 20 years, and down the road, we can realize, you know what, I only think negative about my spouse. She's always leaving the dirty dishes. She's always doing whatever. I'm only going to think negative. And when we start doing that negative talk about our partner, we go down this rabbit hole where it just becomes negative. And if we continue that way as one partner or as both partners, we end up pulling apart rather than coming together.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to stop yourself and go, oh, you know what? I'm being really negative. Let me think of some positive traits. And that goes just like with parenting. You can't just be negative with your kid.
Right.
You can't be negative with your partner all the time, because that's how they're going to feel. And that's when it's going to manifest more negative input to your relationship.
Right. Wow. So I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking about examples, and I see a lot of, in my conversations with specifically soldiers and veterans, because I spent most of my career as a chaplain in the Army. And even today in the counseling field, I see a lot of folks come in for individual counseling, but they're always referring to how they got in an argument with their spouse, their wife, or their husband, and then and it's always the negative.
A lot of times, especially with our soldiers, the spouses, they might not spend a lot of time with their partner because they're deployed or they have a lot of missions. And it's those type of negative things that can pull the partners again further apart. So I try to remind those couples, again, remember the beginning. Or if you can't remember a fond beginning, because a lot of, sadly, our soldier stories start off with, well, we just got married on a whim. It was after basic. And that's all good and great. That doesn't mean it's not going to last. I always remind them, well, let's think of the good things. So when he was deployed, remember how much you loved receiving emails from him, or, snail mail if it was in the early 2000s, because I know that's what I had. I got snail mail. We got one card or one letter once or twice a month if we were lucky. And I always tell them, don't you remember how it felt when you got that letter?
Right.
That's the feeling that you need to focus on. Because, yes, you're going to have arguments. You're going to have things that don't go well. It's been 10, 20 years.
Right.
You're growing. You're adjusting. You're at different phases in your life. Maybe you have children now. All these things can slowly tear the partners apart. But that's why we have to remind them, share your love stories. Share your dreams, your aspirations, and more than anything, like we said here, show your partner that you have that love, that concern with them, that you appreciate them.
When you're talking, and when you were just talking, I got to thinking about what are the triggers to a lot of our arguments. The triggers is not only the way we communicate, but there are other stressors in our life.
Oh, yes.
Stressors such as being deployed, being gone all the time, the soldier, a male or the husband or the wife, so whoever the soldier is.
And sometimes both.
And so the stressors in life just compounds. And it's sort of like, well, the soldier wears a rucksack of all the equipment he needs in a deployment. Well, added to that rucksack are stressors. My son's graduating high school. I need to be back in time for that. Or I can't get back in time. And that becomes a stressor for the partner or spouse at home, the husband or wife at home. And then that not only causes a stressor on the marriage, but on the relationship with the children as well.
Oh, yeah.
So you got stressors such as that. And then I was reminded earlier this week, stressors of time commitments, not only time commitments, but command directives.
Oh, yeah.
You will be at formation at such and such time. And oh, by the way, I have to take my child to child development center or an appointment or the babysitter.
Yeah.
So you have this stressor of meeting the command's needs as well, and we're talking primarily military here, as well as my needs to take care of my child.
Yeah.
So all these are stressors which add to the need for healthy communication.
Oh, and all those are the stressors that, if not done well or handled well, will continue to bring you guys further apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why communication is so important. Mm-hmm. Knowing each other's dreams is so important. And now showing each other that affirmation, that love, that support.
I suppose I'm thinking about how these stressors add to the need for admiration and fondness. How can you communicate admiration and fondness when your cup is full and you're totally stressed out? What do you recommend? I know we're going to talk about admiration and fondness, but what do you recommend when our cup is full?
Well, if your cup is full and you notice that your spouse's cup is full, you can always take some things off of their plate if possible, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if yours is full and you're trying to give other people admiration, it's going to be hard. Sometimes it's going to be quite difficult. And that's when the other partner, if you know your partner's world, again, so important to know their love map, then you'll know, hey, you know what? I know that he's got command issues right now. I know that he's got to wake up early for PT. I know that we have appointments for our kids because they have a lot of appointments. All these stressors, if you know their love map, you're kind of like what I said a couple podcasts before. I want you to know your spouse to the point that if you walk into the living room and you see them crying, you have an idea of why they're crying already without even asking them. And so in that same way, if you see your spouse, see them kind of stressed out, you already know the signals. Oh, he's stressed out or she's stressed out. You can ask them, hey, babe, is there something I can do for you? You do so much for the family. I just want to be here for you and help you out. Can I take some of that out? How about I take the kids to their appointments tomorrow so that you don't have to worry about that? Right. Things like that.
A lot of times, I'll get to that in a minute, what I was just thinking, but I know we're using examples of military because both you and I are from a military background. Your husband was military, and
I'm with a lot of military too.
In the civilian world, it's the same thing, just different. Instead of command directives, it's your boss. So I think the reality is the idea of accepting that there are stressors in life. Instead of trying to deny that we're under a lot of pressure or stress, we just accept it.
Yeah.
I'll give you a real life example this morning. I woke up this morning. My wife was already in the kitchen. She made breakfast for me. But I woke up with the intent of leaving within 30 minutes or 20 minutes because I had to get to the office to prepare for today. I had to tell her that I love her to death. If she would have told me, I would have gotten up earlier, but she didn't tell me.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So I said, just go ahead and put it in a plate to go, and I'll carry it to the office and I'll eat it later. And I had to take medicine. I can't eat with food anyways. The danger there is the spouse getting upset. Hey, I did this for you.
You're so ungrateful.
Yeah, right. And responding like that. And she didn't respond like that. I know she was hurt a little bit because she put some effort into it. But I had to tell her I don't have time.
And I bet because she knows your love story, your love map, that she was understandable and she knew. My husband is very busy, I understand. That's why it's so good to have those love maps and good communication that you and your wife have.
Accepting the fact that there are stressors in life. I think that's foundational to the idea of not allowing stressors to get in the way of expressing fondness or admiration.
Correct. And if it does, has, which we're human, we'll make mistakes. We might say something we regret later on. Just acknowledge it and apologize, and then use your admiration. I'm so sorry that I was a little bit moody this morning. I'm not going to make an excuse. I shouldn't have been moody.
Right.
But I really appreciate that you took the kid to those appointments. Again, how you word it, acknowledging that you made a mistake, acknowledging your admiration and your love for your partner, rather than just saying, thank you for taking the kids. That's nice, but thank you so much for taking care of the kids, and I acknowledge that I made a mistake. Those are two different things.
One of the things I was going to mention, I said I'd get back to it, is that sometimes we become selfish in how we want to interact with the other, whether our husband or our wife. And you didn't meet my need, or darn it, you always do this and you don't communicate with me. So there goes the fondness and admiration opportunity. Instead of we get
criticism and contempt and all the things that the four horsemen that we've talked about before, that just drive you a wedge further and further apart between you and your partner.
Right. Versus the reality is, I don't want to be selfish right now. I appreciate what you've done for me. Just go ahead and put it on a plate to go, and I'll take it home. I'm using my own example. But on the other side too, the other person can get hurt as well. And we don't have to choose to be hurt by that.
Correct.
So am I?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think that it's important to note that not only is this a way to ensure that your spouse feels loved, but to understand that this is, again, the second floor to the sound relationship house. It builds upon itself. And with every floor, you're getting closer and closer to your relationship. So this is going to help with the intimacy, the sex life. All of that is eventually going to improve as you're getting each floor done. But you have to do each floor. So remember, this is the second floor. Before you even get to trying to love one another and express it, we need to know who the other is. And so that's why it's so important to get those love maps.
The word that what you just shared about how the spouse is at home thinking that the soldier, and we're talking military, or we can apply it to civilian work. So we have to be careful.
And I think we need to remember also that it's going to take time. A lot of couples, they think that it's a one-day fix. If we just practice our conversation skills, will be fixed. No, it's a mindset. So if you are going through a hard time in your relationship, your mindset's going to automatically be negative. And that's just normal. It's going to take time to retrain it and to realize I'm only focusing on the negative. Let me look at some positive too. And like I said, this is training that we give couples, but it goes just as well with your children. You got to remember to give as more positive than negative. And when's the last time you recognized a good thing that your spouse did? So just remember that it's going to take time to develop that habit of looking for the good habits, the good qualities in your partner. Again, if you've been going through 10 years of arguments or 10 years not really having a good connection with your partner. That's what we're doing when we do marriage counseling. We're creating that reconnection. We're cleaning out the dust, if you will, that's accumulated over the years and relearning to love each other the way that you probably loved each other in the beginning, but with kids and all these changes. And so the best way to do this, and this is what we would recommend for our clients, because I know you had asked what would we recommend for them to do, is to go home and you can use any type of description word for your partner. So something positive, obviously, because we're trying to practice speaking positively, thinking positively. So you can say things like, I'm so grateful that you're so patient with our children. It helps, them develop well. It shows me a great example. It makes me know that they're loved. Thank you so much for how hard you work. Those are things that we would have them practice. So go home, pick 5 words, and go back and forth and ways of affirmation for one another until you practice enough that it almost comes natural. Because again, we're trying to rebuild that habit and get out of that negative mindset. And just keep on reminding your spouse those positive qualities. You can't ever do it too much.
And practicing is important. Any other ideas how they can practice, stories that you can share?
So another thing that they can do is, like we said earlier, you can practice from going to the very beginning of your relationship or thinking of parts in your relationship, memories, locations that you went together, just any good memories. It doesn't have to be the beginning. You can continue to go throughout your relationship. Hey, remember for our 10-year wedding anniversary, we went to the Bahamas. That was so much fun. Reminiscing on those memories. Those are always good things that I tell my clients. Think of the beginning or think of those really good times in between and focus on those, because when we start having a bad time in a relationship, you'll see how fast all those beautiful memories become forgotten.
Right.
And we get into that negative
And,
mindset.
and I appreciate your example of the Bahamas, but some in our audience may not be able to go to Bahamas. They can go to Gatlinburg. I really enjoyed that trip to the Gatlinburg. Or one of my good memories with my wife is spending time with our granddaughter. I think it was our first granddaughter that we had gone to Gatlinburg with and taken her to the aquarium there in Gatlinburg.
It's a nice one.
Right, and it was a good time with our oldest. Now, at that time, our other grandchildren weren't born yet, or we didn't have them yet.
Yeah.
So obviously, our kids didn't have them yet. So
I think as long as you're able to continue to affirm one another, show that affirmation, it's going to get us prepared for the next step.
well, thank you for joining us today at The Journey I'm host Dan Konjorski, my co-host Crystal Barbosa, Fondness and
Admiration. Next time we're together, we will look on, let's see, what is the next one? Level 3. So turning towards one another instead of turning away. So that's what we're going to talk about next time.
Well, we're looking forward to that. See you next time.